And welcome back. In studio with us now is the national spokesperson of the South African Social Security Agency, SASSA. And this follows a number of queries from our viewers regarding developments in the payment of government social relief of distress grant. Now, recently, the Department of Social Development published proposed amendments that would see the threshold for receiving the social relief of distress grant change. So for clarity around this issue, we welcome Mr. Paseka Letsatsi to tell us a little bit more. Thanks so much for coming through, Mr. Letsatsi. So let's just start at the beginning in terms of the changes that were made for the SRD grant recipients. So let's just outline that and then maybe come to more specific questions.
Good morning, Sakina, and thanks for having us after 2.5 years in the studio. Basically, I think after the regulations were changed, we are now using the Social Assistance Act. We're no longer using the State of National Disaster. And I think Social Assistance Act came with its own nitty-gritties, which we need to make sure that the organization comply with. For an example, issues of the means test and so on. But what the long and short of it, or what makes our life easy, is that the minister has basically introduced, has just tried to engage with the public in terms of making sure that the regulations, people make the comments and so on. Because most people are complaining about the 350 as a threshold. I'm sure you might be aware that there are those engagement of taking it up to 624 to make sure that we accommodate as many people as possible. But one of the things which we also want to talk to the people about is the fact that we have experienced a situation where people do not necessarily want to give us their account, bank account details. And I think we want to appeal to people that when you make an application, just make sure that you basically give us that particular information so that we do not necessarily take longer engaging with you, trying to get all the information which is necessary for us to be able to process the grant.
So has SASSA, done any sort of investigation to establish and understand why people are reluctant to offer that sort of information? Because I can tell you right off the bat that, speaking to some people, they would say, so I am unemployed at the moment, but let's say Sakina decides to send me 500 Rand, and then that becomes a stumbling block to actually receiving the grant. So there are valid reasons in certain instances where people are reluctant to provide that information because it's used against them.
Yeah, no, true, Sagin. I think I don't want to make a wild guess why people do that, but I mean, it does not help both SASSA and the applicant if you refuse to give us the account details. But secondly, I think, Sagina, the situation between me and you would be different if your uncle or your sister, whoever tries to give you 1,000 Rand. The reality here is that if you have 1,000 and I've got 0, our situation is not the same. But the intention here is to make sure that we include as many people as possible, especially people who do not have anything to buy whatever. So people must understand that particular situation.
So, and I'm glad you say that, because I think this is perhaps where the devil is in the detail. And this is what bedevils the entire thing. So people are saying, I'm unemployed at the moment. People may have become unemployed overnight. We know what happened during the COVID situation when it just set in. And you may have had lots of debt and other expenses prior to that you were able to service because you had a job. And suddenly, overnight, you found yourself in the unemployment queue. Now, government says, here's a social relief of distress grant. We are going to try and cushion the blow for you. But at the same time, that 350 Rand is not going too far. It is something, it makes a difference. I'm not saying it is insignificant. It is significant to someone who has no income at all. But one can also understand that people require a lot more than 350 Rand a month to live off. So if they are able to get some sort of donations or people assisting them elsewhere, why would that be held against them?
It's not held against them, Sakina. I think all that we are trying to say is that with the little amount of money that the government have, the intention here is to try to cover as many people as possible. And we also acknowledge the fact that there would be a difference between me and you if you have 1,000 from my uncle and somebody has got a 0 in their bank account. But obviously, there will be a positive discrimination to make sure that we accommodate as many people as possible. I think an organization and perhaps maybe the Department of Social Development would have wanted to give everybody in the country the 350. But because of the little money that we have, we need to make sure that we do the positive discrimination.
So let's talk a little bit more to that, because now, as you explained, the amendments that have come into play, more and more people were left out. So, and many of them complaining, saying exactly that, but we are still unemployed. My status hasn't changed since the previous application. So why am I being kicked out this time?
No, not true. Sakina, I think we're trying to make sure that we operate within the budget, which has been given of about 44 million. And I think we know that at the end of all this particular process, we would have to go back an account to Parliament. The Auditor General will come and audit the finances if we have managed to make maximum use of what we are given. But I think because the Department of Social Development is a caring department, this is a caring government which listens to the complaints of the public. Hence, the minister has released the regulations for public comment. It has moved from 350 to 624, but a decision has not been made. But I'm trying to be careful here not to enter the terrain which is not mine. Remember, the mandate of the South African Social Security Agency is to administer the distribution of social grant, and the issues of policy belong to the Department of Social Development. So I'm a little bit limited in terms of my comment, but I know that the minister has released those particular regulations for public comment.
Then there's, of course, the issue of people waiting, especially during that transition period. So again, the communication was not adequate, and people waited. I remember we tried to do a few interviews and we were told we will come back and tell you when exactly, but that caused a lot of uncertainty and a lot of anxiety for people who depend on these grants. So let's speak to that, and the fact that some people are still waiting, one, and two, those who feel that they were supposed to have been paid from the time of application.
No, we acknowledge that, Sakina, that there were some delays, and I think it's various factors which made the processes to delay this much. We had an agreement with certain stakeholders, the banks in particular. That matter has been buried. We are now singing the same song. But the good news, Sakina, is that we have tried to make sure that we deal with the backlog, especially from April to now. And as we go to August, we are delighted as the South African Social Security Agency that will definitely be dealing with people who have applied at that time. We won't be dealing with the backlog, or we won't be dealing with the reconsiderations and so on. But basically, we do acknowledge that there were delays, and we had to make sure that we do things by the book.
So what is the status now in terms of dealing with the backlog? How many people are still awaiting payment right now?
Look, as we have pitched our numbers to make sure that we remove these particular numbers of people who are, especially those who were appealed because they were rejected. We can safely say that the numbers have gone down tremendously to less than 1 million, which we think that will definitely make sure that we get rid of those particular people who are left, who had made an application. And I'm sure you'd recall, Sakina, that there were complaints that people were saying that they don't get UIF. People were complaining that I've not worked since 2000. Some people were saying I'm not in the NSFAS and so on. So, but what has helped us as an organization, especially this process or the period, has helped us to understand that working together as government, it helps us a great deal to make sure that we get the information. Now we can have access to the Department of Home Affairs. So you can't come to us and make an application and give us an ID, we bounce the information with Home Affairs and we're able to deal with it as quick as possible. So it has helped us a great deal, but we'll try to make sure we'll come back again in August. And when we come to you in August, we'll tell you the good news that we're no longer dealing with the past, but we're dealing with people who have applied at that time.
Well, we certainly hope so, because when you talk about UIF, for example, the various databases that you are looking at before you can effect payment, like that has been one of the sticking points where people have said, you know, I'm not receiving UIF at the moment. And you said, I think in our last conversation, people need to go and sort that out with UIF. And once that is cleared, they can then come and do the application. Well, many people after that wrote to us again complaining that they cannot actually, you know, do anything, because when they go to the UIF offices, they are literally sent from pillar to post. So there's an anomaly here whereby someone, for example, may have received at some point after the lockdown UIF, but that came and went. They have subsequently been unemployed. Now they try to apply for the SRD grant, and you are picking up UIF that they had received, and rightly so, at a certain point in time. And then it excludes them from a benefit that they may rightly have, a right to at this point in time. So how do you guys actually work between the departments?
We basically have weekly meetings with some of these entities, like government departments, Home Affairs, in this case, or UIF, because we are alive to the fact that there's someone who says, I'm not getting anything from the UIF, what are the problems and so on. But I think our limitation, Sakina, is that we can do as much. But if, for an example, NSFAS says Sakina appears on the database, as the South African Social Security Agency, it is not our mandate to tell NSFAS that they are lying, because that is their competency. If, for an example, you make an application now and Home Affairs says this person is not a South African, or this ID is a fake ID number, I think it will be very bad from the South African Social Security Agency and say, no, we're differing with you, Home Affairs. Whatever you say, you are going to make sure that we pay this person. Tomorrow I'll come here and have to explain to you and to the nation why we paid people who do not necessarily qualify because they've got fake IDs, or they appear on other databases. So we trust that those government departments and entities would give us an authenticated information. But like I'm saying, we have weekly meetings where we are able to share the information.
Fair enough. And the examples that you cite, I think, are easier to deal with. NSFAS, yes, you're a student, you are on that database, that will take care of you. If you have a fraudulent ID, we don't expect you to look the other way. But I think the UIF one is particularly problematic for our viewers, because the sort of discussion that you would go into, because UIF would require you to look more closely in terms of the benefits and the dates. And our viewers are complaining that that is not necessarily done, in the best possible way. Because someone may have rightly received UIF, but they are not currently receiving anything. So why are they being excluded?
There might be a lapse to make sure that we close the gap. Hence, we have agreed with the UIF that we must make sure that we have the meetings consistently to make sure that if there are any problems which the beneficiaries are raising, or if there are some hiccups, then we are able to raise it with them as quick as possible, and they can then be able to attend to them. And I can say now, Sakina, as compared to when we started to where we are currently, I think without even defending UIF, I think they are doing a sterling work. They've changed certain things in terms of how they do. But these meetings which we consistently have with them, I think they've helped us a great deal to unlock certain problems. And I think working together with other government departments and entities, make sure that the lives of those who make an application becomes a little bit easier.
The dispute resolution process, that is also another complaint where people feel that they are not receiving information, they're not being communicated with timeously or otherwise, and they wait for long periods of time. And what happens in the meantime? Because if there's a dispute and I applied, let's say in May, and this dispute runs until August, what happens at the point where it is resolved? Do you pay me from May till August, or do you only pay me at the point at which you resolve the dispute?
We pay you when we have resolved the dispute, but the good news about it, Sakina, is that we have agreed as management that because we have your cell number, we need to make sure that we continuously communicate with you. For an example, if you make an application, we need to tell you where your application is. We need to make sure that there's an interaction between you and the South African Social Security agents. We know, for an example, that sometimes people lose their phones. Sometimes people use other people's phones and so on. But we thought that it's important to have the SMS as an interaction. But we are also alive as an organization that most of the time when we try to communicate with people, there are scammers who are trying to come in the space and scam the South African Social Security Agency beneficiaries. But like I'm saying, we have agreed as management that we need to interact. All what we need to do is to make sure that we give information, because once you allow a gap where there's no information, you'll have people complaining to you and so forth. But once we continuously engage with people through using their cell phone, people understand. Our people are very much understanding. So we've agreed that we need to make sure that the processes unfold and we communicate with people so that they can get information.
So I think I've basically asked this question, but Chris says, Sakina, please ask Paseka, how come I'm already paid for June with both April and May still pending? And gives his details of where he can be reached. And I think I've asked this in a different guise, but if you could just respond to that.
No, Chris, thanks for that question. We are dealing with the April and May, but what we were trying to do, Sakina, was to try and make sure that we do not necessarily deal with everything at a go, because we also don't want to end up crashing the system, or we also don't want to end up with problems and so on. So we thought it's important to basically deal with those particular months and make sure that we remove them. But I can tell Chris that as we speak now, definitely those particular months of April and May are being verified, and once they are verified, the money will then be paid to them. Hence, I said earlier on that when we go to August, I want to have a date with you to come here and make sure that we speak to the nation, and we are standing at a position where we are comfortable that start coming from August, we won't be dealing with reconsiderations, or we won't be dealing with people who have problems and so on. We have dealt with the backlog, and we'll be saying that from now onwards we are paying people who have applied in that particular month. So it's a date between me and you.
Absolutely. And I must just say, thank you for always being available. And, we're not always able to answer questions live on air, but I think, we always call people out for not doing their jobs. Paseka Letsatsi of SASSA, always available. When you send us your queries, we send them directly to him, and he always follows up. So we appreciate that, Mr. Letsatsi.
Thanks.
And therefore, you can still continue sending, and what I'll do is I will email to him, as I always do, and we try to resolve your queries. Thank you so much, SASSA spokesperson Paseka Letsatsi, giving us an update and some clarity around the payment of government social relief of distress grants.